perspective of South Asia, so there is a tropical wet equatorial climate. There is tropical wet and dry tropical savanna like environment. There is desert and arid. Arid means banjar, like जैसे ये नजर आ रही है. Desert and arid and semi-arid, humid subtropical, and there is highland area in the South Asian region. So which determines the climate zone upon which we can build up the story of environmental physiology or medicine in perspective of South Asia. Next, please. And then if we look at the temperatures in South Asia, so there is varied and extreme climates in South Asia. Look at the column on the right-hand side, which is the hottest, plus 50. And look at the column with the white snow, so it could reach up till about minus 50. So look at the variation. 100 degrees centigrade is the variation in South Asia. From plus 50 in very hot weather to minus 50 in very cold weather. And there is wettest, almost 90% of humidity. So when we become suffocated, and in Karachi, 1,000 people died a couple of years ago, because of 90% there was humidity. And sometime in the desert, say in Thar Parker, Cholistan, Rajasthan, and there could be as dry weather as 90% dry, only 10% humidity. So there are extremes of temperature in the South Asian climates too. So based on these very facts, environmental physiology and medicine learning is necessitated. Next slide, please. Now, based on this, the question arises, which could be the major environmental issues in South Asia. Upon these issues, medicine is based. So the major environmental issues in South Asia include climate change, geophysical settings, ecosystem changes, overgrazing, that is also one of the hazards, hazardous wastes, deforestation, as you know, and then there is deforestation, jungle kaarte hain hum log, and then there are pollutions, and there's population burden, lack of water resources. If there is water is too much, there is a sea, Arabian Sea, but there is lack of potable water, or biodiversity loss, and there is issues of food safety. So based on these geography and based on this climatic issues, the environmental issues in South Asia, some of them, not the total one, may include these various challenges or the issues. Next slide, please. So based on this, the chapter or the book or the webinar or the seminar or the course content of environmental physiology and medicine can be formulated as shown in the slide. So there could be high altitude physiology. When we call it physiology, it will be called as high altitude physiology. When we translate into applied, it will be called as mountain medicine or mountainous medicine. And there is deep sea physiology, which in medical language, it is called as diving medicine. And then there is extremes of temperature physiology, that is exposure to cold, exposure to hot. And then there is exercise physiology, but in medicine language, it will be called as sports medicine. So mountain medicine, diving medicine, temperature thermic medicine, and sports medicine are the four important fields of environmental medicine. Next slide, please. Continuing with this, there could be disaster physiology or disasters medicine, disaster physiology, and which are the possible disasters in which the South Asian countries, including Pakistan, is exposed to. Look at earthquake. So we had glimpses in 1930, and then in 2005, Like you can see it, how much devastation was done, earthquake, and then there is floods. Even rehabilitation, reconstructive work, like has not yet been started. Still, we are earning money, getting money from other countries, like to help us. And then is avalanches, like 120 soldiers, like in Siachen area, a couple of years ago, they were buried under snow. And it took the armed forces about 2 to 3 years to find their dead bodies. And then there is dust storms and sandstorms. You see the South Asian region and some are part of the interior Sindh, like in very hot weather. So they daily experience dust storms and the sandstorms. And then there is windstorms. Next slide, please. And this disaster medicine, next slide, please, continues with cyclones in some areas, landslides. हर चौथे दिन सड़क बंद है, even मरी की highway भी बंद है, ठीक है जी, landslides. And then there is droughts, then there are epidemics, and then there is forest fire, as you can see in this picture. Oh जी, मरगला की पहाड़ी पे आग लग गई, फलां जगह पे timber mafia. Like sometimes it does it, sometimes it is natural inflicted. So forest fire. So that means mountain medicine. So that means diving medicine, that means sports medicine, thermal medicine, disaster medicine. They are the part of environmental physiology and medicine. Next slide, please. And then there is, look at here, tsunami. We were saved, but it was threatened that Karachi, some part of the Karachi and Gwadar will be hit by the tsunami. Some part of India and mainly Sri Lanka were badly hit. But God saved Pakistan from tsunami and volcanoes, monsoons. Look at the monsoons. Sometimes monsoons, how much havoc is done by them. And these days, mist, fog, and smog. Like you see it well, mist, fog, and smog is done. And 2 days ago, a plane in Nepal was crashed in which 68 or 65 people died. That was because of mist, fog, and smog in that area. And then is high altitude disorders, and then is frostbite, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, and then is decompression sickness, or what is commonly called as bends. So this is the course content, huge course content, of environmental physiology and medicine. Pakistan, being part of the South Asia, is hit by many of them, if not by all, of these disasters. So we have to pay due attention, I will repeat, on disaster medicine, on diving medicine, on mountain medicine, on sports medicine, and on thermal medicine. So these are the components of the environmental physiology and medicine. Next slide, please. So this is the payment of the pathway. It is up to you. Where do you want to see tomorrow? After 10, 15, 50 years, or 100 years after, where do you want to see Pakistan or South Asian region? It is up to you. Shown it here, whether you can plant or you cannot. So it is up to us. So I would think the coming speakers, Brigadier Mazhar Hussain, Brigadier Dr. Mehvesh Arooj, Dr. Rashid Mahmood, Dr. Tasir Ahmad Khan, some of these aspects will be touched and covered by these speakers from all the provinces of Pakistan. With these words, I thank you very much, and I'm grateful to the President and General Secretary of Pakistan Physiological Society to give me an opportunity to open the webinar by introducing the climate, environmental hazards, and the course content of environmental physiology and medicine. Thank you indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the great presentation. And now I would like to request Professor Dr. Mazhar Hussain for his presentation on high altitude physiology.
Thank you very much. बेटा ये माइक इधर वो वाला रहने दे ये वाला ये इधर शिफ्ट कर नहीं वो रहने ये इधर शिफ्ट अंदर से आ Is it digital?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very much. It is my proud privilege to thank the President of Pakistan Physiological Society to invite me at this forum, and my teacher, General Aslam, who actually guided me to learn high altitude physiology. The topic of my presentation is homeostasis at high altitude. As you know that the body mechanisms, they are working all the time to maintain homeostasis in all circumstances, in all changes taking place around the body or inside. So we will be learning in next couple of 10, 20, 15 minutes how our body or the physiological mechanisms help us to sustain in different hazardous conditions at the high altitude. Next, please. Now, the mountain communities who comprise of millions of people residing at mountains, they are economically dependent on animal husbandry, the yaks, the sheep, the goats, on agriculture, especially at plateaus, the altitudes near around 3,000 meters up to that, or slightly plus. The agriculture is also there. Then the tourism is fascinating many of the people visiting to high altitude or to conquer the mountains. Then mining is another important field which attracts the people or go there, and especially near the mountains, the people are engaged in mining, especially the gold mines in Tibet or the gold mines in the northern Chile and the copper mines in Peru. They are famous. And it is very interesting to know that the miners, they usually live at a relatively lower altitude. They commute to the mines which are located at quite a far high locations, and they stay there for a week or 10 days, and they come back to their original location, which is around 3,000 meters or plus. So it means they never fully acclimatized or not unacclimatized, and therefore they keep on exposed to the intermittent hypoxia, which is very interesting component of physiology, and it helps, which has been learned after years in recently, that intermittent exposure to hypoxia is basically the major factor to induce hypoxia induced factor genetically, and which is responsible to regulate all homeostatic mechanisms which lead to the survival of the individual. Next, please. Now, high altitude begins at 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet, and the basis for defining this altitude is that the percent saturation of the hemoglobin falls below 90%, and most of the people who reach at that location, they develop a set of signs and symptoms, which are very famous 6 signs and symptoms which most of the people develop. The headache is developed by almost 100% of the people, the nausea, vomiting, the sleep disturbances, the irritability, then the dizziness. These are the major symptoms of the high altitude sickness or acute mountain sickness, which may lead to sometimes pulmonary edema or the cerebral edema. So despite this hypoxia, millions of people are living above 10,000 feet. Almost 140 million people, they are living the elevation above 2,500. So that means a lot of people are exposed to the mountainous regions. Next, please. Next. So there is no precise definition. Many of people have been defining it differently. But as we ascend high, more than 3,000 meters, then the adaptive changes or the climatary changes are necessary to be developed in the body to save our life. So interest in the high altitude developed in the Pak region, especially because of the dispute and the war over the Siachen, and therefore thousands of the people, the young soldiers, they had to go there and they suffered high altitude illness, and a lot of research was done by both the countries learning the high altitude physiology. Next. So now the major hazard is hypoxia because of the reduction in the barometric pressure, which leads to the development of acute mountain sickness. The symptoms I have already mentioned, which may remain benign or may become malignant, which can lead to the threat to the life of the individual, and he may die unless he is evacuated from that place for treatment. Next. The second important hazard or the challenge is the change in temperature as we ascend to the high altitude. For every 150 meters, there is a drop of 1 centigrade temperature. And in addition to that, reduction in the environmental temperature, the wind velocity, which is very high at the mountains, that plays a very important role to enhance the effect of the cold, because that doesn't let the blanket of warm air in the clothes, and therefore the effects of the cold becomes more hazardous, and the people may suffer from hypothermia or the local cold injury. Next. Which may lead to hypothermia or the freezing and non-freezing cold injuries, and especially the soldiers who are performing their duties in the trenches, they suffer more because sometimes after rain the water accumulates, and that may lead to the effect of the non-freezing cold injuries to their feet. Next. Now these are the pictures of the freezing injuries which many of the young soldiers they suffered performing their duties at the Siachen region. Next. Third important hazard or the challenge is the low humidity, that as we ascend high, the air becomes dry. By the time the temperature drops to say minus 20 degrees centigrade, the partial pressure of the water vapors drops to 1 millimeter of mercury. So it becomes so dry. So this dryness in the environment of hypoxia, which activates the breathing process, and one hyperventilates, it leads to excessive loss of water and leads to dehydration in the ascenders of the high altitude. Next. Then as we ascend high, the environment, the atmosphere becomes more cleaner and cleaner, and that makes us exposed to excessive radiations, and almost over 4,000 meters, 100% increase in the solar radiations takes place. And in addition to that, in the snowbound areas, the snow reflects 90% of the ultraviolet radiations. So that will be enhancing the effect of radiations. And in addition to that, the cosmic radiations, because of the clean or the neat environment, therefore the cosmic rays they will not be absorbed by the dust particles. So the individual will be exposed to the higher doses of the radiation, and which may lead to, on prolonged stay, mutation in the genes, which may ultimately be problem in the offsprings. In addition to that, the atmospheric ozone, which is a toxic gas, which may cause inflammation of the mucous membranes, and therefore the respiratory tract may be damaged. Next. Now, in 1992, the hypoxia-inducible factor was described, and it was thought that it is relevant to the acclimatization changes taking place on exposure to high altitude, which comprised of the ventilatory response to hypoxia in the shape of hyperventilation, then the hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction leading to the changes in the ventilation perfusion of the lungs, and the erythropoiesis. Then subsequently, the ACE gene was discovered in 1998, and its two alleles, I and D, these were related with the athletic performance or physical ability of the people, and like I believe it is relevant to the improved endurance and the enhanced oxygen utilization, and the D allele, it is relevant to the strength and power oriented performance. And that actually explained why the people living at high altitude, the Tibetans or the Hands, they have more endurance and more strength and the power. Next. In 2019, that is very recent, then it was the scientists, three scientists together, they worked on how cells sense and adapt to the oxygen availability, and the Nobel Prize was awarded to them. And they described that the hypoxia-inducible factor A is especially important, which is responsible to activate different processes through nuclear transcription, and different enzymes are activated, which leads to a set of changes which are responsible for adaptation of the individual or acclimatization at high altitude. Next. Now, these processes which adjust the individual to this environment of where there is hypoxia, there is drop in the temperature, less humidity, and changes in the pH of the body fluids. Together, they are regulated by the hypoxia-inducible factors, and they help in compensation to hypoxia. Those who stay there for days or weeks, and they survive. The principal mechanisms which are comprised of the hyperventilation, increased diffusing capacity of the lungs, increased vascularity. Increase in the lung volume and the increase in vascularity, and especially the dormant vessels. First of all, they open, and then new vessels are formed. And then also the induction of enzymes in the mitochondria or in the cytoplasm for the glycolysis. They help in couple of days, but polycythemia develops after 2 weeks. Next. So the three group of changes which are activated by the hypoxia, they are the hyperventilation, cardiovascular changes, and the hemopoietic changes, and all are basically centrally regulated by hypoxia through hypoxia-inducible factors. Next. Now, this is a set of changes which begin with the first of all the hypoxia-inducible factors. They would be activating the mitochondrial genes to enhance the energy utilization. Then they induce the glycolytic enzyme, and anaerobic metabolism is activated. Then vascular endothelial growth factors is induced, which leads to formation of more capillaries in the tissues. And then there is the induction of the enzymes for through arginine metabolism to synthesize nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, especially in the lungs, and it operates through inhibition of the potassium channels and leads to vasodilatation. Then induction of the erythropoietin inducible factor, which leads to deactivate the erythropoiesis. And lastly, the hyperventilatory response is also activated by the activation of the carotid bodies through the peripheral chemoreceptors. Next. So the metabolic and endocrine changes, set of metabolic and endocrine responses, or the changes which take place in the body in response to hypoxia, they comprise of anaerobic glycolysis, marked respiratory alkalosis, which increases oxygen affinity to bind hemoglobin, so therefore transport of oxygen to the tissues will be increased. But at the same time, the hypoxia inducible factor, it will be activating the process to generate 2,3-DPG at the cellular level, so that offloading of the oxygen also takes place. And then there is a considerably higher base excess, which is very high at the at the Mount Everest, around 7.7. And this high arterial pH also enhances the transport of oxygen, more binding to the hemoglobin in the lungs and more transport of oxygen to the tissues. So chronic hypoxia at altitudes, they also affect many endocrine systems as well. The ADH initially, as you reach there in a couple of hours, its level slightly drops, which leads to excessive urination, and that also contributes to reduction in the body fluids and the blood volume, and that gives the misconception perhaps the hemoglobin has increased or the red cell count has increased in day or two, which is not true. Actually, it takes almost 2 weeks to manifest, but initially it is because of the reduction in the blood volume, which is manifested as hemoconcentration and increase in the hemoglobin. But it is also helpful to resist the development of the acute mountain sickness, especially the development of cerebral edema and the pulmonary edema. But in AMS susceptible individuals, usually the ADH rise occurs, and that is responsible to contribute to the development of the high altitude pulmonary edema as well. After full acclimatization, although there is a high osmolarity because of the activation of renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism, but the ADH levels are low. Next thing. Renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism is activated because of the hypoxia, number one, and because of the reduction in the fluid volume or the blood volume, and that is responsible to raise concentration of the aldosterone at high altitudes. In addition, the hypoxia also activates the corticosteroid release through ACTH in the initial 5 to 7 days, which subsequently in the chronic residers of that location, and especially those who stay for more than 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, their corticosteroid level come back to normal. So this sympatho-adrenal system gets stimulated in first few days, and urinary catecholamines have been found to be raised, but they become normal. They reach the normal range with acclimatization, and therefore the resting heart rate also reaches the near normal values. Next thing. The thyroid functions are enhanced. The cold is one of the known stimuli to stimulate the release of the thyroxine, and it helps in the increase in the basal metabolic rate, and therefore it helps in thermoregulation of the individual at a high altitude. And the insulin sensitivity is also reduced initially, but later with acclimatization, it comes back to normal. The glucagon, the growth hormone, bradykinin, sex hormone, they are little affected. Initially, they are raised, but not too much, but after acclimatization, they come back to normal. Renal functions, they stay normal at high altitude. Next. Erythropoietin, which is released by the kidneys, it is activated by the hypoxia and the blood loss, and it is believed that the reduction in the blood volume on the initial days, that is relatively a stronger stimulus than the hypoxia to release erythropoietin by the kidney. So within 2 hours, the erythropoietin it starts increasing, and in 24 to 48 hours, it achieves its maximum level, and it's in response to polycythemia. Its concentration comes back to normal even at high altitudes. Next. Now, in almost over 3 decades back, high altitude research cell of Army Medical College, it visited the glacier, the Sachin Glacier, and this is the group of 24 people who ascend to that altitude for research, and the objective was to study the metabolic, ventilatory, and endocrine changes taking place in response to acute ascent. In addition to these 24 people, 20 people who were already there for 4 and 8 weeks, they were also included in the group after reaching there, and their metabolic, ventilatory, endocrine parameters were measured and later assayed. Next, please. So this was the setup which was built there. I think you can see a small igloo at the backdrop on the right lower picture where everyone was residing. There was all snow outside, and Petromax was the only source for heat inside that igloo. And then in that area, a location, the blood gas electrolyte, the device analyzer was also taken, and the room temperature was not comfortable, but it did not remain zero. It was around 10-15 degrees centigrade with the help of this Petromax, and we did have this generator with us for energy supply to run the equipment. Next. And we also, those who developed acute mountain sickness, the Gamo bag, which is a simulated ascent, was demonstrated to the people at that location. This is a single body or 2 body small bag which can be carried by the people to that location. And this is just like the descent, as one can place an individual inside, increase the pressure but through the pump. As you can see here, one person is pumping the air into it. As the pressure rises inside, it is just like a descent. So that is an emergency treatment which can help to save the life of the individual. Next. So the conclusion of that study was that at high altitude, there is an increased alveolar oxygen, the percent saturation due to increased respiratory rate and vital capacity and flow rates, and supported by the respiratory alkalosis. Increased hematocrit and arteriovenous oxygen difference was also detected, and there was increased level of the erythropoietin within 24 hours. But those who were residing for more than 4 to 8 weeks, their erythropoietin level was near normal. In addition, the aldosterone level were increased 2 to 3-fold during prolonged hypoxia to ensure the soil and water economy. And in that study, also it was learned that acetazolamide and the dexamethasone, if given together, it can prevent the development of the acute mountain sickness. So the lesson, next, The lesson learned is that one should not be going too fast, too high. Here I would like to mention, Jan Aslam must be remembering that when we reached at the altitude, 2 lieutenants, they came there. Although they were asked not to ascend quickly, but they did not bother to listen to us. They said that this is all misconception. We are young people, and so far we haven't felt anything wrong reaching at this 4,500 meters. They ascended to their duty of location, and after 24 hours, they were brought on stretchers because they both developed the high altitude pulmonary edema. So one should not be going very fast to the high altitudes. One should avoid overexertion because that will utilize more oxygen and and can lead to development of the complication of the acute mountain sickness. If possible, one should have the sleeping altitude, a lower one, and which is used by the miners and nomads and porters who carry your weight. They don't stay at the high altitude; they go back to their home around 3,000 or 4,000 meters. And maximum ascent should not be more than 1,500 meters in one day. And voluntarily, one should also hyperventilate because of the washing away of carbon dioxide, which is the primary stimulus to activate the breathing mechanism. In some of the people, the breathing rate may drop. So one should consciously try to hyperventilate to oxygenate himself. So take plenty of water because of the dry conditions. There are chances of bright chances of the dehydration, and one may suffer from complications. So at least 3 to 4 liters of water must be drunk in 24 hours. And one must be knowing the symptoms of acute mountain sickness, and the colleagues should monitor. If someone develops, he should follow the standard operating procedures and the advice. If there is a bad weather, one should wait, one should not ascend. With this, I conclude my talk, and thank you very much for listening and providing me the opportunity to share something about the high altitude physiology.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very informative discussion on high altitude. Now, the next presentation is online by Dr. Mavish from Lahore. We have 42 participants online who have joined us. Assalamu alaikum.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum ji. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
madam, you are audible.
Great, thank you, Dr. Samina. I'm really grateful to Dr. Umar Ali Khan for giving me a chance to talk at this respected forum, and my kind regards to General Islam as well. Today, as you all are aware, that we are talking about environmental physiology, and so I basically choose the topic of carbon monoxide poisoning because I think this is a very important topic, and this is very much pertinent to especially today's situation, especially in the cold weather, when there's an excessive or extra use of the gas heaters, stoves, and heating system in the cars. So I think this is a very important issue, especially in the winters. And I think we all remember a very sad and a tragic incident that happens about a year ago back in Murray in January 7, 2022. There was a lot of snowfall, and there were many families. They went there to enjoy the winter vacations with their families there, and they were stuck in the snow. And as a result of that, in the morning, next day, about 22 people, they passed away inside their vehicles. Most of them, they were not dead because of the cold, but the main reason was the carbon monoxide poisoning. And one of the cause is the defective exhaust systems in the closed, unventilated space, especially in the cars, and along with the poor ventilation. And there's so much vehicle and the fuel emissions. So that is a cause that leads to the death of about 22 people 1 year ago, and it is a very tragic incident. So I think that so that's the reason I specifically choose this topic, because I think this is our duty as a doctor to talk about these things as much as possible, and also to raise awareness on such topics to the general public, as we are aware that carbon monoxide is also known as a silent killer. So the toxicity or carbon monoxide poisoning, that's not new, and it happens very frequently across the globe. So we sometimes listen about this in the news, in the newspapers as well. So there are some incidents that were reported again back in 21st of November 2022, and there were some Americans, they were founded in Mexico City, died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So there are many incidents that's been reported of carbon monoxide death. So that's again the incident that happens in the Murray, and the main reason was the carbon monoxide poisoning. So let's talk about it. What is carbon monoxide poisoning? So it is a most frequent cause of the fatal poisoning, and worldwide about 137 cases, that is about 4.6 deaths per million, is reported every year. Carbon monoxide, it is a colorless, odorless, and a tasteless flammable gas, and this is known as a silent killer because किसी को पता भी नहीं चलता, and it kills the people. और अक्सर unfortunately सोते में लोगों की death हो जाती है. And almost most carbon monoxide poisoning occur accidentally, but some cases there are suicide attempts, they have been reported as well. If we look at the incident of carbon monoxide poisoning, about 58 to 75% of the death, it occurred due to the poisoning caused by carbon monoxide inhalation. And specifically, the carbon monoxide poisoning, it is common in the industries, and it is the leading cause of death due to the industrial chemical that is used in the paint, that is thinner, and it is about leads to about 31% cause of the carbon monoxide poisoning. And it is more reported during the winter due to the excessive use of heaters, excessive use of the engines, excessive burning of the coal, wood, petroleum, and other products. So what is the main source of carbon monoxide poisoning? This poisoning, it basically results as a result of the incomplete burning of various compounds which contains carbon, such as coal, wood, petroleum, fertilizers, dried dung, and the natural gases. So the concentration of carbon monoxide in the air, in the atmosphere, it is generally less than 0.001%. However, when there is an incomplete combustion of the hydrocarbons, this ratio in the atmosphere increases. So what happens in the complete combustion, the hydrocarbons are combined with oxygen, and they are basically converted into carbon dioxide and the water. But when there is incomplete combustion, these hydrocarbons are combined with oxygen, and they leads to the production of carbon monoxide. And this carbon monoxide, when there's an excessive amount, then this leads to the poisoning, and mostly I'll be talking about the acute poisoning cases here. Another cause is exhaust gases in the motor vehicles, when they're operated in the poorly ventilated areas. So the exhaust gases, they emitted from the motor vehicles, they are major deadly source of carbon monoxide. And even exposure to these gases released in the closed garage, it can also lead to a fatal blood level of carbon monoxide, and it may lead to death in 10 minutes. The potentially fatal exposure may also occur in semi-closed garage or areas even close to the garage. So the motor vehicles which are operating in the poor ventilated areas, in the ice rinks, in the warehouses, in the garage, and the keyless cars, if they're left running, or during the snow, the tailpipes, the exhaust, they get blocked by the snow. So it leads to the accumulation of carbon monoxide in that closed space, and that leads to, again, the reason for the carbon monoxide poisoning. Another source of carbon monoxide is the inhaled or ingested methylene chloride. which is an industrial solvent and a component which is present in the paint remover. And it also leads to carbon toxicity in those persons who does the paint job. And it is again common in the cigarette smokers or the hookah smokers. The cigarette smokers, about 4%, they smoke about 4% of carbon monoxide. The baseline carboxyhemoglobin level in the smokers and non-smokers, if you compare, so it's smokers, it is about 10% as compared to non-smokers, that is 2%. So who is at risk, or what is the risk group? Infants, pregnant females, elders, patient with the chronic respiratory and the heart diseases, and the anemic patients. So in all these cases, there is an alteration in physiology. They put these groups at a higher risk level than the normal population. So what happens in pregnancy? In pregnancy, as we are aware that fetus, they are at higher risk level than the mother, and the fetus, that they have a fetal hemoglobin, which has higher affinity for carbon monoxide than it does for the oxygen. And this exposure, it could lead to an increase birth issue, especially leads to cerebral palsy in the newborn. And it is one of the main reasons that women, when they are pregnant, they are encouraged not to smoke or to avoid the increased exposure to carbon monoxide products. And again, some of the workers whose main job is at to the areas with a high level of carbon monoxide, they also have an increased risk of exposure, like welders, garage mechanics, firefighters, organic chemical synthesizers, diesel engine operators, forklift operators, toll booth at the tunnel working in a closed environment, the police officers, and the taxi drivers. So in all those areas, the level of carbon monoxide is high, and it doesn't lead to acute poisoning, but it can lead to the chronic carbon monoxide poisoning over the period of time. So according to the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, every year the workers, they die from carbon monoxide poisoning, usually while using fuel burning equipment and the tools in the building or the semi-enclosed spaces without adequate ventilation. So this basically leads to the chronic carbon monoxide poisoning. So how the carbon monoxide poisoning occur? What is the pathophysiology behind that? So basically the carbon monoxide, it does three things. It impairs the oxygen transport. It also impairs the oxygen utilization, and it leads to the production of reactive oxygen species. So the carbon monoxide, it has high affinity to bind with hemoglobin, even more than 250 times more than the oxygen. And when the carbon monoxide, it binds very tightly to hemoglobin, the oxygen and carbon dioxide, it can no longer be carried away. So as we are aware that hemoglobin molecules, they contain about 4 oxygen binding sites, and the carbon monoxide, as I told you earlier, it has 250-fold greater affinity to bind with hemoglobin as compared to the oxygen. So the hemoglobin, they occupied by carbon monoxide, is now known as carboxyhemoglobin. So when carbon monoxide, it binds to hemoglobin subunits, it decreases the affinity to bind with the oxygen molecule and leads to the insufficient oxygenation at the tissue levels as well. So the carbon monoxide, it shifts the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve to the left side, leading to the insufficient oxygenation at the tissue level. So the main organs which are affected by the carbon monoxide poisoning are those that are highly oxygen dependent areas, like the cardiovascular system and the nervous system. The carbon monoxide, it binds to iron containing proteins, not only in the hemoglobin, but also in myoglobin. So basically, myoglobin is an iron containing protein, which is found in the muscles of, especially in the heart muscles. And myoglobin, it serves as a storage site for the oxygen. When there's a reduction in the function myoglobin, there's a decrease in the oxygen level in the hearts, which lead to cardiac ischemia, dysrhythmia, and the adverse cardiac functions. Furthermore, The carbon monoxide, it also decreases the oxidative phosphorylation by blocking the myocardium and brain mitochondrial cytochrome oxidase system. And further, it leads to also the increased production of reactive oxygen species such as superoxides. So by this pathophysiology, carbon monoxide is also known to cause long-term neurocognitive sequelae, especially relating to the brain injury. So how the carbon monoxide, it causes brain damage or the brain injury. So this is the pathophysiology. The carbon monoxide, it binds to the platelets and release nitric oxide. Now the platelet-derived nitric oxide, it reacts with the neutrophil-derived superoxides, and these platelets are activated and platelet neutrophils aggregates are formed. The degranulation of neutrophils, this process causes the release of myeloperoxidase known as MPO, proteases, and reactive oxygen species, which is linked to immune-mediated neurological issues. The reactive oxygen species, they initiate lipid peroxidation and interact with brain myelin basic protein. The altered myelin basic protein, it triggers an adaptive and immunological response that causes the neurological dysfunction. So this is how the carbon monoxide, they disrupt the neurological functions in the body. And the MPO index is a newly reported inflammatory markers that basically reflects the MPO levels within the neutrophils. So this is an article that basically, this is a recent article that tells the prognostic value of the myeloperoxidase index for the early detection of neurological outcomes in case of acute carbon monoxide poisoning. If we look at the factors that affect the carbon monoxide actions, one is the minute ventilation, other is the duration of exposure, that is the longer the exposure, the more is the carbon monoxide absorption in the body. Then the concentration of carbon monoxide in the environment. The higher the concentration, the greater is the chances of the toxicity. The concentration of oxygen in the environment, the lower the oxygen concentration in the environment, then the faster the symptoms they will develop. Especially it is more evident at the higher altitudes where the level of oxygen is low, and also in the closed unventilated spaces. If we look at the carbon monoxide level, so in the fresh air, the carbon monoxide level, that the normal level is 0.06 to 0.5 ppm. In the urban air, the level is about 300 ppm. And the cooking on the stove, it also produces the carbon monoxide, but the level it is less, about 100 ppm. The person actively smoking cigarette, the level is from 400 to 500 ppm. And from the automobile exhaust, that is from the car exhaust, it is about 1 lakh ppm. If we look at the level, normal level of carbon monoxide, the normal level is 0 to 50 ppm, it is good. And 51 to 100 medium, 100 to about 200 is unhealthy. And from 200 to 299 is very unhealthy, and more than 300 is harmful. So if you just imagine the amount of carbon monoxide that is produced by our cars, the engines of the cars, and if those cars, they are in a closed unventilated space, so the amount that carbon monoxide is produced, it is very harmful to the body. So it may leads to the death of a person in minutes. If we relate the level of carbon monoxide to the symptoms, at carbon monoxide level of 50, there is no adverse effect within 8 hours of exposure. At the 200 level of ppm, it leads to the mild headache after exposure of 2 to 3 hours. At the level of about 400 ppm, it leads to serious headache, and the life-threatening is life-threatening after 3 hours. At 800 ppm, it causes vertigo, nausea, convulsions, and death within 2 hours. From 60 up to 1600 ppm, it again causes headache, vertigo, nausea, death within 1 hour. At 3200 ppm, it causes headache, vertigo, nausea, and death within 1 hour. 6400, it becomes more dangerous. Within 1 to 2 minutes, headache, vertigo, and nausea, and death occurs within 25 to 30 minutes. And about 1200, about from 1200, it's 1200 and 800, it leads to the death in 1 to 3 minutes of time span. So this is why the carbon monoxide is known as a silent killer, because it causes death in a minute, and the person who is dying is not aware of what is happening within his body. There are various ways to detect the carbon monoxide detection. In fact, I was talking with one of my friends, and she came from US, and she told me that the carbon monoxide detectors, they are usually placed in their house along with the smoke detector. So they have a regular carbon monoxide detector in their houses. And whenever they detect, whenever the level of carbon monoxide is high, it basically sends an alarm. So there are various ways to detect this. There's a carbon monoxide oximeters, and again, lab-based carboxyhemoglobin levels, they can also measure. They can also be measured. The half-life of carbon monoxide is on 21% room air. It is about 4 to 6 hours. The half-life of carbon monoxide on 100% oxygen is about 80 minutes. And carbon monoxide half-life with hyperbaric oxygen is 22 minutes. So the shorter the half-life, the shorter the duration of effect produced in the body. So increasing the concentration of inhaled oxygen, basically, it can help minimize the binding of carbon monoxide to hemoglobin. So basically, the treatment of carbon monoxide is to give oxygen. If we look at the management, the first thing is to remove to a safer environment, remove from the space where there are high levels of carbon monoxide to a ventilated area, and to give high flow oxygen. Immediately begin with 100% oxygen delivery, or also hyperbaric oxygen therapy can be done. So there is an emergency management of patients in case of carbon monoxide poisoning. If we look at it, basically depends on the Glasgow coma scale. If it is less than 8, then just intubate the patient. If the Glasgow coma scale is more than 8, and there are symptoms like respiratory distress, use of accessory respiratory muscles, if these symptoms they are present, then again intubate the patient. If they are absent, then there are 2 ways. One is to initiate the 100% normobaric oxygen, or also the other option is to give the hyperbaric oxygen as well. So what is the take-home messages? Carbon monoxide, it may be difficult to detect carbon monoxide, but it is easily preventable. There are some tips by how you can prevent the carbon monoxide poisoning. One is the proper quality checks of the generators, geysers. Carbon monoxide, install carbon monoxide detectors in the houses. There are portable carbon monoxide detectors, they are also available. And also avoid the burning items in an unvented, closed fireplaces or the stove. Also, do not use the gas or propane fueled oven to warm a space. Install carbon monoxide detectors. They detect even a small, minute level of carbon monoxide in the environment. And again, beware of the symptoms of the carbon monoxide poisoning, that is headache, dizziness, weakness, nausea, vomiting, chest pain, and confusion. And if there's any suspect of carbon monoxide poisoning, just leave to the area and go to the doctors as quick as possible. And never keep a vehicle running inside the garage attached to your house. And again, I think as a doctor, it's our responsibility to talk about these things as much as possible, to do awareness sessions, lectures, walks, camps, to aware the community, and to also educate them on the dangers, and ensures they know what to do in the case of carbon monoxide poisoning. So these are some of the references. So thank you so much.
Now we would like to request Professor Dr. Rashid Mahmood from Rahman Medical College for his presentation on sound physiology.
Time बता दीजिए.
15 minutes is the total time sir, for the presentation.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much to Professor Umar Ali Khan, Professor Mustafa, Al-Nafees Medical College and Pakistan Physiological Society. You arranged a very important session that was need of the day. My topic is on environmental physiology, and I'll cover the aspect on noise. This is just some pictures that it was my research topic when I was doing my MPhil in 2022, 2003, when there were no research facilities available. There was very little access to PubMed and even printing and computer and internet. And I did this research on effect of the noise on heart rate and blood pressure. Until that time, it was not known that whether noise affects other things other than hearing also or not. And in my research, then we came to conclusion, yes, it does affect heart rate and blood pressure and many other things also. Professor Aslam has told very nicely about what is the environment and environmental science. Just to converge to my point, two slides so that I can concentrate on my point. The environment is everything around us, and environmental science is interdisciplinary academic field that integrates physical, biological, and information sciences to the study of the environment and the solution of the environmental problems. The branches are of environmental sciences. They include atmospheric sciences, they include ecology, they include environmental chemistry, they include geosciences, and of course, they include environmental physiology, which is also called ecophysiology. And the environmental physiology is defined as a biological discipline that studies the adaptation of an organism's physiology to environmental conditions. It is concerned with the environment's influence on the physiological function and performance of the living organisms. The environmental physiology investigates the influence of environmental factors on physiological functions in humans, and the main factors out of the many which affect the environmental physiology, they include gravity, the pressure, the temperature, the sound, and of course many others. And if there is introduction of contaminants to the natural environment that cause adverse change, this is called pollution. And pollution may be night pollution, it may be air pollution, it may be water pollution, and it may be land pollution. And we concentrate on the noise pollution and its effects on human physiology. So the contents will be: what is noise? What are sources of noise pollution? What are the adverse effects of noise? Are there any effects of noise on wildlife, marine life, material, and plants? What are the mechanisms behind health hazards of noise? What are the solutions for control of noise? How much is the allowable exposure to noise? And what is the noise level of everyday activities and different vehicles? So definition of noise, there is no one single accepted definition. There are many definitions. Sometimes it is defined as unwanted sound. The definition is subjective because of the fact that one man's sound is another man's noise. This drum sound is noise for one, and it is not noise for anyone else. So unwanted sound is not a good definition. The clapping should have been in the end. So wrong sound in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was also defined for many days, for many years, that any wrong sound was called to be noise. Sounds that are disagreeable or unpleasant produced by the acoustic waves of random intensity and frequencies. Now, this is scientifically called to be the noise. Disagreeable and unpleasant produced by the acoustic waves of random intensities and frequencies. And the physiologists, they define the noise as any audible acoustic energy that adversely affects the physiological or psychological well-being of the people. The importance of this subject: the noise has become a very important stress factor in the environment of man. World Health Organization stated that noise must be recognized as a major threat to human well-being. Now, we just have a quick look on the sources of the noise pollution: transportation systems, construction, industrial noise, loudspeakers, defense exercises, generators, household machines like juicers, fans, and vacuum cleaners, etc., airplanes. I just give him a minute. It is trapped. Right. Boat noise, television, music, and of course many others. Now, the adverse effects of noise, they may be on humans, they may be on wildlife, they may be on marine life, and they may be on plants. We have to concentrate on the adverse effects of noise on humans. So the adverse effects may be auditory effects and they may be non-auditory effects. The auditory effects, they include deafness, which is well known after prolonged exposure. The deafness is one of the very well known effects of noise, and tinnitus also. The non-auditory adverse effects of noise, which were not known till year 2000 or so, and now the scientists are becoming gradually familiar with the non-auditory effects of noise. They include increased heart rate, they include increased blood pressure. There's effect on many pituitary hormones. Some are increased, some are decreased. Increased incidence of ischemic heart disease. There's interference with performance and efficiency. There's interference with communication, headache, fatigue, giddiness, nausea, increased incidence of accidents in noisy areas. Vasoconstriction has been reported. Increased circulatory levels of stress hormones, abortion even, and these are documented. These are effects of excessive noise, they are documented. Abnormal labor, low birth weight, pregnancy-induced hypertension, increased intracranial pressure, increased respiration rate, sweating, interference with sleep, visual disturbance, narrowing of pupils, altered color perception, reduced night vision, effects on child physical development, effects on cognitive development, annoyance, and many others. Now, just a quick look on effects of noise on wildlife, marine life, material, and plants. The noise is not only affecting the human beings. There are many effects on wildlife. There is damage to the hearing of the animals, and due to that, it can reduce the chances of their survival. The study was done on kangaroo rats. Their physiological response is affected. There is hormone imbalance and there is chronic stress. Behavioral response has been observed in animals. There is panic and escape behavior. शोर सुनते ही भागना शुरू कर देते हैं इधर उधर. The response results in decreased food intake, loss of energy, abandonment of offspring, infertility, and injury. And this has been studied in noisy areas that animals, they survive less in noisy areas as compared to the silent areas. Effect on marine life has been studied. This change in delicate balance in the predator or prey detection and avoidance. This interference in the use of sound in communication, navigation, and even reproduction. It has been seen that in noisy areas, whales and dolphins, they are dying. They suffer from bends, that sphere pains, and one of the causes of the whales beaching themselves is said to be the noise being produced inside the seas. Effect on plants has been observed. The production capacity or growth of plant is affected due to higher noise level. Damage to the material has been observed. The buildings and the material may get damaged by exposure to infrasonic or ultrasonic waves and even get collapsed. The mechanism behind all these health hazards of noise, especially in human beings, still a lot of research is on, not known exactly, but some things are clear that there is activation of neuroendocrine system. People who live in noisy areas, it has been found they have got increased urinary metabolites of the cortisol, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, and we all know that these are the stress hormones. Peripheral vascular resistance, it increases, leading to the cardiovascular effects, and it is said to be the sympathetically mediated. Now, must be some solutions for the control of noise to avoid all these hazards of the noise. There are many organizations in the world, like United Kingdom Professional Body for Acoustic, the International Institute of Noise Control, Pakistan Environmental Protection Agency is there, and these are the links which are given, and they can be searched, they can be Googled. There are many action laws in different countries. The United States Noise Control was originated in 1972. There is United States Environmental Protection Agency, local noise ordinances in US, Europe. There is Pakistan Environmental Protection Act in 1997, and there is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Environmental Protection Act 2014. And when we control the noise, different terminologies are used, like acoustic engineering, acoustic quieting, environmental health officer, environmental scientist, noise control engineer, by quiet programs and initiatives, audio engineers, noise attenuation, construction, etc. So to make the recommendations for control of noise, we classify into three: that noise should be controlled at source. If it cannot be controlled, its transmission should be controlled. And if this cannot be controlled, then the exposed persons should be protected. So noise can be controlled at source. Every vehicle should have regular periodic inspection. Faulty silencers should be removed. Pressure horns should be avoided. There should be limited use of car horns during peak traffic hours. Traffic jams have to be controlled. There should be noise control of factories and industries. Use one appliance at a time at home and office. Turn down the volume of TVs and radios. Use minimum volume of your phones. Do not allow loud toys allowed attached to the children. There should be regular lubrication and servicing of the machines, and there should be rational use of all instruments. So if noise cannot be controlled, its transmission should be controlled. Like sound absorbing materials can be used. Soundproof doors and windows are being constructed nowadays. Implanting trees and bushes around the sound generating sources can help to reduce the transmission of sound. This is an example of Melbourne, Australia. There is aesthetic noise barrier they have made. This reduces the transmission of the sound. Now, if the transmission can also not be controlled, then the person's export should be protected. Like you can use earplugs. Maximum, I shall come to in next few slides, exposure should not be more than 85 decibels. The people like traffic police working in noisy areas should be regularly rotated to silent areas. There should be regular measurement of noise level by the noise level meters and educating the people. But how much there is allowable exposure to noise? It was said to be 90 decibels for 8 hours till 1981. It was said that if you are exposed to more than 8 hours per day for 90 decibels, you may get deafness. But these things were revised in 2019, and I don't know whether they have been further revised. Up to 80 decibels, maximum exposure per is 25 hours. That is in one go. This is in one go. 85 decibels, 8 hours. 90 decibels has been reduced from 8 to 2 hours. 95 decibels, 47 minutes, and 110 decibels, 1 minute. This I'll come that which areas produce how much sound. Now, any sound above 85 decibels is to be considered as noise. Previously, it was 90 decibels. Now, finally, we have to know what is the noise level of everyday activities and different vehicles. Like rock concert, 110 decibel, and we have just seen that we should not be exposed for more than a few minutes. If sound pressure is too high, chainsaws 100 decibels, jet planes are 1030 decibels, rainfall may go up to 50 decibels, conversation is in a group 60 decibels. Private office 30 to 5 decibels, general office 50 to 65, normal speech is 60 to 70, average traffic is 70 to 90 decibels, raised voice or shouting is 90 decibels, and more than 120 decibels is painful to the ears. And this was during my research. A study was conducted in Peshawar. Average noise produced by different vehicles in Peshawar. Neutral gear and around the scares, say motor cars, it was 64 decibels, around the scare 59 decibels. This is one motor car, and one auto rickshaw 98 decibels, pressure horns 104 decibels. And these things are being revised. These were the number of vehicles which were examined. And I thank you all for your patient listening, and thank you to the organizers for giving me a chance to talk on the topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And now it's the time for our last presentation of Professor Dr. Taseer Ahmed Khan from University of Karachi.
Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please. Yes, you are audible. Like slide share here.
Yes,
slide
just
show
a
को पूरी
second.
तरह-
I'm starting it. Just a second.
Okay.
Okay, share the screen. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to all and a very good morning. Well, I'll actually be talking about the integrated dependency of physiology and environment. The other speakers have already talked about the altitudes and the toxicities of the environment, but I'll try my best to correlate how much the physiology of any of the living organism on the earth is closely correlated and attached with the environment. Well, we all know what is this physiology. Basically, the study of function mechanism of a living thing, and habitat is basically the surrounding the condition in which a person, animal, or plant lives and operates. And environmental physiology is basically the influence of physiological function and performance of living organisms. It's called environmental physiology. This is what.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. जरा full screen कर दें.
Slide show पे आ जाइए.
Slide show पे आ जाएं.
Sorry.
The slide show अगर कर दें full screen.
It show. I did.
सर double click कर दें.
Is it changing?
F5 press करें.
चल
Is it changing or not?
Also.
F5 press करें जरा.
F5?
जी. Keyboard से.
VG F5. Press key on F5.
चले फिर next.
एक सेकंड. मैं स्लाइड शो से हटा के चला देता हूँ फिर इसको.
ठीक है चल दे.
आई थिंक तो पता नहीं वो इसका इंटरनेट स्पीड का इशू आ रहा होगा. Okay, so mainly how much is physiology correlated with the environment? This is what we just heard from the previous speakers. Okay, what environmental physiology? This is what actually is the whole scenario. The environmental physiology, basic ecology, evolution, and the biological process. And I might be talking about all these things, how temperature is affecting the physiology, how nutrition. It's not just the nutrition available outside, it's the nutrition available within the system to the cells and everything. If you don't have enough nutrition available, your body won't respond to any of the things. What is actually natural selection? And how does the altitude affects the mechanism of a living organism? Previous speakers have already discussed in details the effects of altitudes. Okay, effect of temperature. This is all what it does. Just a change in temperature. I'm moreover interested in what actually environment does with us. Change in fact, whatever we are doing these days for our betterment, for our relaxation is paying us back. We are trying to get chillers, we are trying to get good lifestyle, we are trying to get everything, but in return, the nature is paying us back with everything. We end up into DNA damage as a result of excessive sun exposure. We end up into hormonal changes because of endocrine disruptors. We end up into water loss and to this. But the main thing is the environment is actually affecting the performance of a living organism. This we all very well know the change in body temperatures usually affects all these things and ultimately the behavior of a person also. The climate change, what actually is occurring these days is either directly affecting things or indirectly affecting things, or it's actually affecting the socio-economic impact. Environmental physiology is a very, very broad area. It's just not related with the human biology, or it's everything. Environment, what we can see these days, the last few months back, the flood did to the whole country. It's basically a change in environment. What resulted was the people would actually end up into migrations. People would actually result in increase in food demands, unequal distribution, means the climate change would end up into all of these things. Altitude physiology, we have already heard a lot on this. What mainly I would like to show here is it's not just that the change in altitude is causing changes in pressures and oxygen and everything, but the change in altitude is actually also causing change in your internal microbiota, the gut microbiota, which is strongly correlated with the behavior these days. Many studies have proven that the gut microbiota of a human individual or an animal is directly in correlation with the behavior of a person or behavior of an animal. These are the what we call bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. A balance of these two is good bacteria. Going to high altitude result in low growth or low profiling in the intestine of an individual that actually may result in a behavior change. Similar is the case with here. If you move in to a high altitude for a longer time, there is an increase in these microbiota. The gut microbiota is a very most important thing that actually alters every possible mechanism going inside the body, every possible thing related to the behavior. Nutrition, we talk largely that we need to have a good diet. We need to have everything best for us. We should go for a very good diet and a balanced diet. But the main thing is the cell inside us need a very favorable environment to perform its activities. The genes inside us need a very favorable environment to express themselves. We are trying these days to have a good lifestyle. This is what actually we end up into, try our best to remain healthy, but many of us are unaware of the term healthy, what actually healthy means. This is basically the critical window after which an unhealthy early lifestyle would actually disrupt your internal microbiota, disposing you to the disease susceptible conditions. And the other one would actually create a disease resistant environment inside yourself. It's just the external and the internal environment. The climate change would definitely alter this cycle, the food, the diet, and the health and nutrition cycle. The main thing is the climate or the nature would take its, what we take from the nature would definitely take it away from us one day or another. It's all known that adverse effects of these intakes, like if we go for restricted intake of protein, if we go for restricted intake of fat, if we go for restricted intake of carbohydrate, that will definitely affect our physical activity, that will definitely affect our daily routine life. Just for an example, depriving ourselves for folate and B12 would definitely result in anemia. We all know these things, but the only thing is we don't go for a very favorable things. We have to have a balanced environment for a balanced performance. This is what actually the living organisms of the earth are doing. This is Galapagos tortoise. They live on islands that have got low shrubbery. So these tortoises have got short legs and short necks, while the vegetation, the areas or the islands where a taller vegetation, the tortoise have got long legs and long necks. These are Marina iguana living on Galapagos Island. It has got a long claws and grip rocks, dark skin to camouflage. I conclude why am I talking about it. Finches, the size and the shape of the beak is due to the diet. Short, broad beaks are used for crushing seeds. Adaptation, like the environment would keep on changing, the nature would keep on changing. What we have to go for is to adapt ourselves with the changing environment. A physical feature or behavior that helps an organism to get food, protect itself, move is adaptation. Traits as beak shape, change, whatever the changes are required to survive, because it's the survival of the fittest phenomena in the nature. The organism with favorable adaptation would have a better chance of getting the resources they need. Like this is what it is. This is an environmental change, a bird performing a mating dance to attract a mate. This is a learned behavior. As a result, if a raccoon won't find food anywhere, so it would definitely learn something like opening a container to search for its food. This is an adaptation to what this dart frog would do in case if it's threatened, and what a pufferfish would do if it's actually being threatened by the predators. Well, as a result of environmental and climate changes, these are actually the facts what we are facing. The overall functioning of any of the living organism in the earth is severely affected with the changes in environment. If we just go through this presentation, it's estimated that approximately 821 million people are undernutrition. There's ocean acidification. There are 1,600 deaths. There have been internal displacements. There have been global oxygen decrease. All these things are as a result of environmental changes being done or produced by what we have been bringing about for our betterment. And we are actually toxifying the nature and toxifying the environment. These challenges would be faced within the future. And if we want to go for a better living society, we should try to minimize these things, and we should focus on, let's say, net zero emission. We should focus on changes in the climate system. We should try our best to avoid air toxicity. We should try our best to to prevent ourselves from producing such things which are more toxifying to the nature, and ultimately would result in environmental changes to which probably in the future would be very difficult for us to survive. Just a very important thing, this is what is mainly concerning these days, what like endocrine disruptors. Why are these important? What is the most important thing? This all is actually environment. This is all what is around me. This is all what is around you. This is all what is around us. And we are actually exposing ourselves to all these things, even though we know every single bit of thing. Leading a very simple life is the key to a success. Leading a very easy and a simple life. Like, why is this disruptor so much important? It might, there are many things that is still under investigation or research, but there is a potential of these things that they might cause delayed effects. They might, the main thing is this, these effects are largely overlooked. The thing is, what we should do, we all are mainly environmental physiologists inside us. There is an environmental physiologist inside us, and we should try our best to control the basic environment. These endocrine disruptors might result in hormone-related cancer. These endocrine disruptors might result in diabetes. It's all too early, but let's say after 10 years or 15 years, if we end up into these things, and people would be talking about that we already knew it, and we actually ended up in these things. What mainly thing I would say is that don't deny your internal or inner environment physiologist. We all have to live today for a better tomorrow. We can reduce or we can control changes in atmosphere. We can control changes in environment. We can control changes in everything, provided that we want to be a better physiologist. We want the physiology to work normally. We want everything to go normally. Even if I want to have a good diet, and if I want my cells to perform very well, I definitely need to provide them with a very good environment, cellular environment. Cellular environment would be only better if I start taking a balanced diet, and taking a balanced diet would definitely assist my cells and my genes and everything to perform normally and preventing me from the diseases. So takeaway would be a good environmental physiologist, because there's nothing separate. There is no environment which is without physiology, or there's no physiology without environment. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent, Dr. Tasi. What a wonderful ending talk.
So now the house is open for discussion.
House is open for discussion, please.
Can you allow me video or unmute me, please? May I ask questions?
Yes, please.
Yes. My question is from Professor Mavish Rouge. Professor Mavish, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. You talked very nicely on carbon monoxide poisoning. We actually were not that much aware about that. Question is that, is there something like adaptation or acclimatization to the chronic exposure of carbon monoxide, like in smokers? They smoke 30 or 40 cigarettes per day, and we do not see those effects which should have been there. So is there something like they do adapt to this, or there's acclimatization of the blood vessels and other things?
Yes, as I told you earlier, that there are two ways. One is the acute carbon monoxide poisoning, and other is the chronic carbon monoxide poisoning. And in the smokers, it basically leads to the chronic carbon monoxide poisoning. But definitely its results are not that adverse, because in case of the chronic poisoning, the level of carbon monoxide is not that much as compared to the acute poisoning. Yes, the body may adopt progressively in response to that. And it also, in case of the chronic carbon monoxide poisoning, it also causes the polycythemia in the blood as well.
Okay, thank you.
The question, please. So, Dr. Mirza, can I make few points?
Yes.
थोड़ी सी गुजारिश करनी थी, माशाल्लाह फिजियोलॉजिस्ट बैठे हैं। हमने 3 मरतबा 142 इंस्टीट्यूट्स को खत लिखा कि आप अपने डिपार्टमेंट के मेंबर्स ऑफ फिजियोलॉजी हमें भेज दीजिए और डिपार्टमेंटल मेंबर्स के नाम भेज दीजिए। So we are thankful to 40 medical colleges who have responded and sent names of 238 members for the green book. So today we will be sending another letter. So I request all of you to please respond to that so that we can update our green book. एक तो ये गुजारिश करनी थी, और आप जो नहीं हैं उन तक आप ये बात पहुंचा दीजिएगा प्लीज, ये भी रिक्वेस्ट है आप लोगों से। दूसरा पॉइंट ये था कि इंशाल्लाह फरवरी में probably around 15th February, that is Wednesday, we will be having a session on curricular reforms in physiology. कि ऑनलाइन होने से हमें क्या क्या करना है, और फिर अगर हमें फिजियोलॉजी टीचिंग तो हम चले वो कर लेते हैं, लेकिन जो प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट है उसको हम कैसे इसमें कर सकें। तो मे बी नेक्स्ट डॉक्टर सूर्या विल बी टेकिंग केयर ऑफ द सेमिनार, so all of us should get prepared mentally, and then we should mark our calendars by 15th of February, Wednesday 2023, inshallah. Thank you very much. So now we can have this, please proceed.
Any other questions? We can now distribute the sheets to the chief guests and other participants.
Yes, please.
So it's not a question, it's rather guidance from you, and also a request, because you guys have big names and you are at a position that you can make a difference for we who are just the starters in the position. So we are almost all of us, we are freshly MPhil graduates planning to do the PhDs or the FCPS in the later time. So physiology की अगर से मैं बात करूँ, I've been attending the ISRA. This is my second session, and online I've been, through the links I've been there in webinars as well. So just guidance from that as majority of these students, that there are certain things, as you have talked about the environmental physiology, some high altitude पे सर किसी का काम है, किसी का noise पे काम है, किसी का carbon monoxide पे काम है. So sir, एक ही चीज कि जब आपकी innovations आप मानते हैं and there are gaps in the study and you have to do the latest work for your research to make a difference, it is not always applicable to the humans. Because you cannot do the drastic changes on a herd or something. So ultimately, you have to prove your point first on the animals, or the people who are suffering from the diseases. Or even if you are, preparing a medicine and you have to give to a certain human, they will not take it because it is not tried and tested, it is not proved, it is not in the market. And the researchers and the publications and the journals, they want that it should be the latest work. And that is all definitely done on animals. Why, sir, there is a deficit that all the journals, whether it's of CPSP, whether it's of PMBC, they do not allow the publications for the animal studies.
देखिए, जगह CPSP में ये anomaly थी but now they have allowed study on animals to be published in JCPSP. Reason being, they prefer those projects which are FCDS Part 2 and the clinical sciences to get thousands में है वो अपना work publish करते थे और उनके लिए human work की वो prefer करते हैं because they are clinicians. But now they have allowed animal work to be also published in JCPSP. दूसरा कौन सा जर्नल बताया था आपने? CPSP के दो तीन ऐसे medical sciences का journal of medical sciences. CJMS. And yes, they do not allow the CPSP का तो Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences is Dr. Javed Saab. Who runs the pulse. There is no bar in Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences of any book, whether in animals or in human beings, or even medicinal role of the disease even in plants. It is a good research and bad research. That's it.
So also
JCPSP में थी, and that was by the council. Now they are removed.
So good impact factor वाले जो करते नहीं है.
लेकिन 4 impact factor वाले जर्नल है पाकिस्तान में. एक PGMS सबसे बड़ा वही है. उसके बाद पाकिस्तान JPMA उसमें कोई restriction नहीं है. JCPSP has now removed. Fourth one is Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Pharmaceutical sciences का उसमें कोई restriction नहीं है. वो तो है ही. Animal studies भी है, human भी है.
मैं इस पे थोड़ा सा रिस्पॉन्ड करूँ. हमें भी एक आधा जर्नल चलाते हुए तो 2-3 जर्नल चलाते हुए लगभग 3 दिहाइयां हो गई. 30 बरस. यकीन करिए कि जो एनिमल स्टडीज आती हैं इतनी शर्मिंदगी होती है पढ़ के, इतनी शर्मिंदगी होती है कि हम आपको बता नहीं सकते. हल्दी पे काम, कलौंजी पे काम, धनिए पे काम, प्याज पे काम, और उसका कोई एक्सट्रैक्ट नहीं लिया. जबकि हमें यानी इतना अंदाजा हो अगर फार्मा को ये जो इसकी होती है आप पढ़ें तो हर 40-50 मिनट के बाद जैसे जबान में तब्दीली आती है वैसे जमीन में तब्दीली आती है. और जो जमीन की तब्दीली आती है उससे जो पौधे उगते हैं उनमें भी तब्दीली आ जाती है. ये एनवायरमेंटल फिजियोलॉजी है. विदाउट नोइंग कि जी अदरक कहाँ से शांत मसाले से हमने ले ली, व्हाट इज दैट, वो कितने % प्योर थी. ये वो चीजें जो आपको पहले करनी पड़ती हैं. बहुत अच्छी रिसर्चेस भी हमने देखी है कि जिसमें पहले उन्होंने प्यूरिफाई किया, फिर बताया कि ये कंटेंट से इस इलाके में मैंने ये काम किया. इलाका मेंशन ही नहीं होता. और आप देखिए कि आज दुनिया आप क्लोरोक्विन हम कहें कि नहीं मैं तो वो कोई ना बात पे काम करूंगा तो नोबडी विल एक्सेप्ट इट. तो आप बताएंगे कि जी दुनिया में जितनी दवाइयां बनी हैं ये बनी हैं जो ओरिजिनल चीजें थी उनके ही मॉलिक्यूल्स को लेके उनको आपने बना के इस्तेमाल करते हैं. तो इस चीज को आप देखिए कि स्टडी में आपकी कितनी जान है। और ये इनिशियली जब आप थीसिस लिखने लगते हैं तो आप सोचना चाहिए कि इसमें मैं आर्टिकल लिखूंगा नहीं लिखूंगा। ये बच्ची बैठी है हमारी लड़की सादिया, ये मेरे से अभी तो गाली ले रही होगी। जब इसका रिसर्च मैंने बनाया तो उन्होंने कहा कि इतना ज्यादा जेनेटिक काम क्यों करा रहे, 1350 का सैंपल साइज FCPS में, ये क्या बात है। हमने कहा नहीं हम करेंगे, क्योंकि आगे इसकी स्टडी ऐसी हो जो आज पैदा होके कल मर ना जाए। पता नहीं आपने बचपन में एक वो पोइम पढ़ी या नहीं पढ़ी, सोलोमन ग्रंडी, सुनी है या नहीं सुनी? मैं आपको सुना देता हूं कि आप देख लें कि आपकी रिसर्च सोलोमन ग्रंडी तो नहीं है। हाँ जी, आप बिल्कुल सही कहा, सोलोमन Grundy, born on Monday, Christian on Tuesday, married on Wednesday, took ill on Thursday, grew worse on Friday, died on Saturday, buried on Sunday, and that was the end of Solomon Grundy. So if I have got Solomon Grundy research, so nobody will accept it. और आप एक नॉवल बताएं सर, नेचर में छपते हैं आर्टिकल, नेचर से बड़ा कोई वो नहीं है, नेचर में छपते हैं एनिमल स्टडी में। फिर आपको एनिमल स्टडी के साथ दो चीजें सर आपने हमें सिखाई, एक इन वाइट्रो फिर एक इन वीवो। तो क्या हम दोनों एस्पेक्ट, आप ये जो यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं सर, इनके अंदर दो चैप्टर लिखने पड़ते हैं। सर ने हमें सेल पे काम कराया, हमने तो अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह जहां भी आर्टिकल, सर हमारे एमफिल में भी उस्ताद थे और पीएचडी में भी उस्ताद थे, FCPS में, दोनों जगह सर ने हमें सेल पे काम कराया और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह जहां भी स्टडीज भेजी वो छपती रही। लोधी साहब, इन्होंने भी एनिमल स्टडी की, सबके आर्टिकल छपे। सो यू हैव टू थिंक एंड लुक इनटू इट कि कहाँ गलती हो गई एंड आई शुड नॉट स्टॉप इट। फिर क्या एमफिल के बाद आपने रिसर्च कंटिन्यू कर रही हैं, तब आपके आर्टिकल छपते चले जाएंगे। स्टडी प्रोस्पेक्टिव होनी चाहिए, रिट्रोस्पेक्टिव नहीं होनी चाहिए, और वन टाइम सोलोमन ग्रंडीज नहीं होनी चाहिए। तो 5 मिनट मैंने भी ले ली। थैंक यू वेरी मच। सर अनाउंस करें ना, मैं अनाउंस।
First is for the chief guest, Major General Muhammad Aslam. ये तो अच्छा पास है।
स्टॉप करने चाहिए।
नहीं सर, माशाल्लाह।
हमारा कल्चर अगर नाम नहीं लिखा हुआ किसी और को
नहीं सर।
Thank you very much. God bless you. डॉक्टर साहब आप खैरियत से हैं? माशाल्लाह बड़ी अच्छी बात सर को दे दी।
हाँ, मैंने कहा आप लोगों को देख लो इसलिए।
The second shield goes
सर नाम मिला है।
to President Pakistan Physiological Society, Professor Dr. Muhammad Umar Ali Khan.
आई सर मदर साहब वाली आपको दे दें। आई सर आप दें।
This shield is for Professor Dr. Mazhar Hussain.
सर
ठीक है ठीक है सर ये सब दे दूंगा।
प्रोफेसर फरमानुल्लाह साहब ने वसूल की है शील्ड फ्रॉम प्रोफेसर मदर। थैंक यू वेरी मच। प्रोफेसर राशिद, प्रोफेसर तासीर, प्रोफेसर वैविश, इंशाल्लाह यू विल रिसीव योर शील्ड थ्रू कोरियर। सर ये लोधी साहब है जी, लोधी साहब। अच्छा लोधी साहब, माशाल्लाह। Yeah. ये सब सच चलिए अच्छा प्रोफेसर साहब मुनज़्ज़र दो तो नहीं very well done मुनज़्ज़र thank you very much excellent ये मज़हब वाली चीज़ तो आपकी ये नहीं मतलब सामने नहीं
Please, Dr. Mustafa.
Yes. बेटी आप किस कॉलेज में
I'm from Islamic International.
अच्छा बेटी आप कभी कोई वक्त रखें हम मेडिकल राइटिंग पे हम एक छोटा मोटा स्टडी करें और तो आपके पेपर इंशाल्लाह जरूर छपेंगे.
So we are in a process, we are sending to the different journals, but it was just the thing that उनकी instructions to the guidance to the author में ये होता है कि we do not publish the annals.
नहीं we do publish. देखें it should be आप ISRA medical journal भेजें. If it is a good research we'll publish. But if it is not up to the mark extended है फिर वो माजरत कर लें. So you are most welcome. नहीं सर चाय
सर जरा हमारा एकेडमिक कंसल्ट कर
अच्छा सर बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया जज़ाकल्लाह बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अच्छा